So if you're investigating, either from a law enforcement or from an intelligence standpoint, the hacking by a foreign hostile government, wouldn't you want the server? Wouldn't that help you, number one, identify who the attacker was? And if memory serves me, this was early in the summer of 2016 when we learned of the DNC hack. So if they had turned the server over to either you or Director Comey, maybe we would have known more, and maybe there would have been more for you to report. So I guess what I'm asking you is, why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.
Why wouldn't the victim of a crime turn over the evidence to the FBI was the question. And the obvious response here is because the DNC is lying. We know that the DNC leaks were an inside job and that the leaker, Seth Rich, was murdered by the DNC. Yet somehow these obvious facts escaped our senators. This entire Russia investigation is a fraud meant to distract people away from the contents of the leaks. These DNC leaks and the Podesta files confirm that Hillary and company are not only crooked liars, but they're hypocrites as well. Democrats want to complain about the Russians hacking their servers, yet the Obama administration was hacking millions of Americans, mostly conservatives, through the DHS and the IRS, and nobody has gone to prison. They even hacked Donald J. Trump, and again, nobody has gone to prison. This is very relevant to that investigation. This is a huge piece of the pie, because what they're saying is that the Russians hacked the DNC, and this is how we knew that they were criminals. This is how we knew the Democrats were criminals, because the Russians hacked the Democrats. But that's not what happened. The reason that we found out these people are criminals is because it was leaked from the inside. So if they're going to have congressional investigations on Russian collusion, they absolutely need to look into this Seth Rich murder. That's why we're seeing this massive cover-up. That's why we're seeing them just continue on, they're continuing on, droning on about the Russians. The Russians had nothing to do with this. We know the Russians had nothing to do with this for a million different reasons. And even if they did, they told us that Hillary was a criminal. They saved us from electing a criminal as president of the United States. If anything, we should be sending them a thank you card. Thank you, Russia, for letting us know. But it turns out that this was an inside job.
Why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.
One person with any kind of platform, Sean Hannity, steps up, decides to start asking the right questions. And what happens? What happens immediately afterwards? They try to crucify him. Seth Rich died trying to do the right thing. It's time people stood up and said, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to allow an elite class to shoot us dead in the streets like a dog. We're not going to allow a complicit media that's basically just a propaganda wing for the elites. Tell us what to think. The elites are so used to the rule of law not applying to them. It's escalated and escalated. It's escalated to the point to where they're literally murdering people right in front of us.
Actually, the means to do it. So an orderly decline of the dollar is actually desirable.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished. Now, it could actually get out of hand. And certainly the fear of inflation will precede inflation itself, but still is a cost. So somebody has to pay it. And I think we have actually the means to do it.
We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes.
Michael Morell added that the killing of Russians should be done covertly, but in such a way that the Kremlin would get the message.
8 prominent Russians found dead since the U.S. election, 5 of them diplomats, including Ambassador to the UN Vitaly Churkin.
We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes, covertly. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes, covertly.
Obama, Hillary, Bremer, Clapper, and Comey are part of a group hell-bent on world destruction. They need World War III to rebuild a world. The ruling elite have the means to survive a full-blown nuclear war. But for that war to happen, they need the Russians to launch a nuclear strike. So Obama and company have been deliberately and desperately trying to start that war by drawing the Russians closer and closer to a nuclear strike. Obama launched a civil war in Ukraine, a proxy war in Syria. They murdered associates close to Putin and even attempted to murder Putin himself. They downed the Russian fighter MH17, Flight 9268. And where did this adventure begin? It began with Edward Snowden, the supposed leaker that told the world what they've known for years, that the 1984 Orwellian society is spying on you. Let's revisit Snowden's plans. He leaves Honolulu, Obama's home base, to spill the beans. Snowden says he wants to go to South America but embarks for Hong Kong instead. And after leaking his information, instead of leaving Hong Kong for South America, he flies to Moscow, forcing the Russians to take him in. And that's where things kicked off. Just a few months later, just a few months after the Russians gave Snowden asylum, there was war in Ukraine. Then they shot down MH17. Then there was war in Syria. And that's brought us back to everything we've covered today. Breaking news. Obama and the Democrats are trying to murder the world. And they need the Russians to do it. They need the Russians to launch a nuclear strike to get their plans started. That's why Hillary and the media are focusing on the Russians. They want war. They want nuclear war. So don't buy that the Russians did it. Instead, look into Seth Rich. Look into the Podesta files. Look into Pedogate. Look into Obama did it. Bremer did it. Comey did it.
Why would the victim of a crime not turn over a server to the intelligence community or to law enforcement?
I'm not going to argue with you, sir.